Hi, Jim Sammons here. If you're a kayak angler, you know how hard kayak fishing is on your gear. You really have to stay on top of the maintenance. I highly recommend using good gear because it is going to last for you much better. But there are certain things, like I said, kayak fishing, it doesn't matter what you do. If you're a saltwater guy particularly, you're very close to the water, and these things just get wet. Even no matter how careful you are, they get wet with salt water. So there's certain things that you should think about after every outing, particularly if you're fishing like once a week, once every 2 weeks, where you're not like out there every day. So first off, a good thing to do, just a basic maintenance, is when you get back from fishing, give it a nice rinse down. Now, when we say that, you don't dunk the reel in the water and you don't blast it with water, because that just pushes the salt crystals and everything into the reel. So if you're gonna rinse it off, do it nice light spray and then wipe it down. If you want, you can take an oil like this Get Some here, put it on a rag, and then wipe it down with that. And that's gonna remove any of the salt water that's on there, but it's also gonna push away the water. So it's gonna keep your reel in much better working order. And that's just a very simple thing. Every once in a while, go in there, a few drops of oil. Now, you see people who want to use like heavy grease and all that, but for your bearings and such, you usually want just a really, really lightweight oil like I have here, or again, even this Get Some. They've got a couple of different types of it. But you really should, every so often, take your reel apart. If you're not comfortable taking a reel apart, then take it to a shop. Because like I said, it doesn't matter how careful you are. You lay the rod down on the deck of your kayak, salt water gets in there, and eventually saltwater crystals start to form and get really gunked up inside the reel. So every so often, either take it in and get some maintenance done on it, or do it yourself. One of the reasons I really like these Truth reels, the reason I started using them, is because they've been so bulletproof and they are easy to tear apart. So I'm just going to go over a quick teardown of this reel and just show you the things you want to look at and that anybody could really do. It's not a real in-depth teardown, if you will. So first off, the nice thing about this is that this Truth reel, again, is they're so easy to work on. Basically everything I need to do here, I can do with a set of Allen wrenches, which makes it simple. Now, with this particular reel, when you take off the handle, they actually use some Loctite on there. So when you put it back on, you want to put a drop of Loctite on that screw. That's the only one. It's always a good idea to have a little bowl or something near you so you can make sure none of your stuff goes away. So there was a little bit of Loctite actually got up in there and was holding it on nice and snug. So you've got that one. And all these other ones are all the same size. There's just 3. One thing you want to remember with a lever drag reel is whenever you're adjusting the drag or doing any kind of maintenance like this, is always have it all the way in free spool.
Why?
Because if you're adjusting the drag, which the drag adjustment is here, this adjusts it once it's been pre-adjusted. So you preset your drag with this knob here, and then when I'm fishing with it, you use the lever to get up into the drag setting you preset. If you are up in gear and then adjust the knob, what'll happen is you can bend some of the pieces in there and then you totally mess up your drag curve. The other thing is to make sure that you don't set it so it's so tight when you're pushing the lever up there that it's just pounding down on the interior of the reel. It actually will damage the cam. The nice thing is it's a super easy thing to replace. The bearings are so bulletproof that you're not going to hurt the bearings. So I've taken out the 3 screws. We undo the drag adjustment. And then that whole side plate's going to come off. Woo! And the cam is right here, right up in here, and that can pull right out also. So the main thing here is when I get to this point, I usually just get myself a paper towel and just wipe off, because what happens is this is where you tend to get salt crystals all formed up in these areas. And they'll get up, this is a pretty clean reel, but they'll get up inside along these edges and up inside here. So just make sure you wipe out any gunk that might be up in here. There is a bearing right here, so I would put a little bit of oil on there. Of course, that thing's not open. So I will use my Get Some. The main thing is don't put grease on the bearings. It's better to have a nice light oil. So like I said, very, very simple. This whole main gear can come out. Because the way this is designed, the dog over here, which is this piece here that fits in the groove here, it's a super strong dog, but it doesn't go flying out. You don't have to worry about that at all. And again, you just pull that gear out and wipe this out. I'm not going to, because there's a nice bunch of grease in here that's kind of giving it a little protection, and I don't want to wipe that out because this, again, this is not a heavily used reel at this point. Besides the dog, there is an anti-reverse bearing up inside of here that you can get to from either side. So I have a bearing here, and then I have an anti-reverse bearing up inside there. And again, I just tend to give those a little bit of a lubricant with this light stuff, and it's just going to keep this reel free spooling so much better. And I will drop that back in. Very simple. The main thing here is make sure that parts just don't go flying every which direction, especially when you're doing this outside. So you have this shaft here, and again, another bearing. So just a little bit of lubricant there. There is a grease coating on here, but just make sure you don't have a whole lot of impurities on here. Check out the inside on this side. Make sure that there's not a bunch of salt buildup. You tend to get the salt buildup along these edges, and that's what really slows down the free spool of your reel. So just make sure you wipe that out if it needs be. This one again is very clean. So once you have the reel apart, like you said, the nice thing about these Truth reels, as you can see, there's not a whole lot of parts here. You know, they did a really good job of eliminating unnecessary parts. There are definitely some reels out there that when you pull them apart, you know, you undo a couple of screws and the whole thing just goes flying in a million different directions. You know, I've got this whole reel torn apart basically, and everything is right here. Nothing has gone flying. It's just a super easy reel to maintain. And the nice thing is these guys also have a lifetime warranty. So if you look at the around the spool here, it's got a little bit of salt buildup there as well. So I want to just wipe that out. Just keep it nice and clean. This will just drop right back down in there. Make sure you... The main thing is just make sure you line everything up before you tighten everything down. Because if you don't have it lined up properly, when you try to put it back in, it's like that had a little keyed notch, and I just had to turn it a little bit so it dropped all the way in. If you don't do that, when you try to tighten things up, you can damage stuff. That goes there. That goes there. Got my head backwards. That goes there. Said literally the easiest reel I've ever had to work on. I remember back in the day we'd get the old Pen 500s and you'd open them up and there was a spring that would go flying across the room. It was the spring for the dog, for the anti-reverse, and it would just go flying across the room. Never failed. So you always had to be very aware of that. And it was always like the first time, or you haven't opened one up in a while and they'd go flying. It was just a nightmare. Considering this is a much more advanced reel, but it's so much simpler. There's just so many less parts. So you want to tighten these things up evenly. Don't tighten one up all at once, because then it'll you can end up uneven. So just tighten them up one at a time, or I should say as you go, and then that way it'll get on there nice and even. Put the handle back on, get a little bit of Loctite, and put it on that screw, because if you don't, that one can come loose on you.
What is Loctite?
Loctite's just like a little glue that locks into the threads and keeps that screw from coming loose. Because the last thing you want is your handle coming off your reel as you're fighting a big fish. That thing out of my way. So when you're adjusting that drag again, move it up into position, test it. You can see hardly any drag. Take it out of gear, adjust it. That's way too tight. And you'll feel it. If you go to move the lever forward and it's just really snug, never force it, because that'll flatten out the cam and then your drags get really borked. So there we go. That's probably pretty tight. Ah, that's nice. Nice smooth drag there. So that was a real quick, what you should do. I mean, a tear down on a truth reel, but some basic maintenance that you should do on your reels every time. Again, give them a wipe down, light with water, maybe a little bit of a WD-40 or this Get Some. Wipe it off, and that'll displace all those salt crystals, and it'll keep your reels working, functioning for a really long time. I hope you liked that video. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments and I'll answer them as soon as I can. And if you haven't done so already, give us a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to Kayak Fishing Tales.